Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you're safe at home and coping with the situation. I'm Elias Nicholas, the Cleantech specialist at Berytech, and I'll be your host for today. As you all know, we are facing major issues in the cleantech sector, and we need to start acting upon. So we need to create a supportive community of experts, partners, NGOs, public and private sectors to help and support startups and entrepreneurs working in the cleantech sector, for us to help them to answer not only local, but also regional and international needs in this sector. The Cleantech Learning Series are organized by Berytech, and it's under the Cleanergy program funded by the Embassy of the Kingdom of Netherlands in Lebanon. Allow me to briefly introduce you to the Cleanergy Accelerator. So this accelerator basically aims at supporting ideas and startups working on solutions to the challenges existing in the cleantech sector. So the team will have to tackle challenges in transportation, energy, water, waste, or agriculture. Through this program, Berytech is offering the selected startups the resources, knowledge, support, and funding necessary to scale and grow. You can check additional info and eligibility criteria on Berytech's website, berytech.org. You can go to programs and select Cleanergy. The deadline to apply for the first batch of the Cleanergy Accelerator is beginning of June. If you think you have an innovative solution in the cleantech sector, I urge you to check the website and submit your application. The Clean Technology Learning Series will continue to happen every Tuesday on Zoom. We are having every week different guest speakers discussing the challenges and opportunities in the cleantech sector, specifically in waste management, water, wastewater management, and energy. At the end of the webinar, we will open the door for Q&A. This will happen on Slido, so you can go on slido.com, write the code shared in the chat window, and submit your questions. So we'll be pasting a link in the chat window on Zoom. You can go to it and submit your question anytime. Allow me now to thank our guest speakers in today's webinar. Today we'll be hosting Dr. Najat Saliba and Anwar Al Shami. Dr. Saliba is the director of the Nature Conservation Center, NCC, at the AUB. Dr. Saliba is leading projects based on public participatory approach that aim to find innovative solutions to local environmental challenges. She was voted among the top 100 most influential women by BBC in 2019. She has also received the 2019 L'Oréal UNESCO International Award for Women in Science and the National Order of the Cedar from the President of the Lebanese Republic. Also the Honorary Cedar Shield from the Speaker of the Parliament of Lebanon and the Lebanese National Council for Scientific Research Award in the environmental category in 2016. Dr. Saliba will be joined by Anwar Al Shami, who is the lead environmental engineer at the American University of Beirut, NCC, Nature Conservation Center. He published several online decision support tools and monitoring dashboards, and as part of his work at AUB NCC, he led on a multitude of solid waste management projects. He has experience in integrated solid waste management, energy policy analysis, air pollution, inventories, geospatial imagery analysis, marine surface oil spill modeling, spectral wind wave modeling, and web-ready interactive data visualization. Thank you again, Dr. Saliba and Anwar, for being with us today. I will leave you now to lead on your presentation. You can share your screen. Dr. Saliba. Dr. Najat, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Just
Yes,
1 second.
No. Yes, take your time. So please feel free to share your screen whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to see. Okay.
Yes, we can see it now.
Very well. Well, thank you, Elias, and thank you, Clean Energy and Berytech, for this nice invitation. I'm honored to be your guest speaker today. And the presentation will tackle two main subjects that are definitely related. I will start by talking about the urgent need for an integrated solid waste management plan in Lebanon. And Anwar will continue with the online tool and some ways that, that we propose solutions at the AUB Nature Conservation Centers. So the outline of the presentation will include the current need for an urgent integrated solid waste management amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. We will go over the history of why and how solid waste management has been tackled in Lebanon. It's important to mention gracefully and also being grateful to all the initiatives that have been undertaken individually and by NGOs, but how those initiatives cannot be the main solution for integrated solid waste management. We will go to the fundamentals of solid waste management by looking at the Wasteaware indicators, and from there on lead the way to the online tool that was developed by Mr. Anwar Al Shami. Everyone now is talking about the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown and the generated waste, especially from people who contracted silently the virus and stayed at home. So if you browse the website, you can find that a lot of solid waste management, private and public companies have actually put out a rapid response mitigation strategy of how they will be collecting and also dumping or treating the waste that they collect. So it's not business as usual, because lots of the waste that is generated from some residences could be contaminated with the virus. And here comes the problem with dumps, open dumps that are mainly present next to residential buildings. So these waste bags could be contaminated at the surface and probably from the food inside with the virus, the SARS virus, that come from people who have been actually living at home and disposing their waste with those open dumps or with the other people who are not contaminated. I just want to mention here that usually if people are in the hospital, hazardous waste have a different or a special stream of dumping and getting rid of the waste at the hospitals and other health service facilities. However, when some people are contracting the virus and staying at home and mingling their waste with the waste of other people who have not gotten the virus, this is where the problem becomes more important. And this is where surfaces of these waste bags and waste content become more dangerous. And so a lot of people are talking about airborne particles being able to carry virus like SARS-CoV-2. So if the surfaces of the waste bags are having the viruses, and it has shown by scientists that viruses can live on surfaces for more than 3 hours, then these viruses living on these surfaces can be entrained by wind, and by that, they will be part of the air particles roaming in the air. And if the virus is able to survive in airborne particles, that means anybody walking or living next to these open dumps can be susceptible to inhaling these particles. Of course, this is science work in progress, research in progress, but the first preliminary results have shown that viruses can live and survive in airborne particles. So this is a very, very important problem that we have to always be careful of when we dump waste next to residential buildings. The second problem that scientists are also discussing is the probability of having lots of rodents being mingled or being, being exposed to these waste. And by doing so, they either eat contaminated waste or they rub their skin and their fur against those surfaces that they are contaminated. And once they are traveling from waste dumps all the way inside our homes, being rodents like cockroaches or rats, they can carry the virus with them and deposit it onto our floors and surfaces that they are in touch with. And this is definitely a potential health risk that we need to attend for. And the third and most important and also important health risk is how human being in contact with bags and contaminated food can themselves acquire the virus. And by doing so, they can transmit it to other animals and probably, and I say and stress here on probably, transmitted to human, because research is still undergoing to understand whether human can transmit the disease back, the animals can transmit the disease back to humans. It was found that human can transmit the disease to animals, like the case of the tiger in the New York Zoo, in the Bronx, basically. But up until now, there are no research that have confirmed that the virus can be transmitted from animals to humans, but this is definitely a potential health risk. So in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, there is an urgent need to really take care of how we collect and dispose waste, especially the solid waste that is coming from residential homes and municipalities. And so we in Lebanon have been struggling with with having an integrated solid waste management plan since 1920. And I cannot stress the importance of pushing everyone living in Lebanon now to actually pull efforts together to come up with a plan so that we can minimize the health risk from the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So let me go briefly over the history of how the government and people have managed solid waste management in Lebanon. In 1920, they assigned the solid waste management to the Ministry of Health and the sweeping and cleaning to municipalities. In 1970, they acquired 2 places to dump the waste that is generated mainly from Beirut in Karantina and Amrosiye. And then with the breakout of the civil war, everything broke loose, and then we had open dumping, mushrooming everywhere in between the city and also in rural villages. In between 1991 and 1994, there's still no plan of integrated waste management until we got to 1994 and 1997, where the government contracted a private company to take care of the waste, and they rehabilitated the 2 open dumps that were originally initiated in 1975, namely the Karantina and Amrosiye. This lasted until 1997, where we had a major waste crisis. And all of these initiatives that were taken up to 1997 were not integrated waste management plan. They were responses to crisis, basically. And we continued as such. Between 1997 and 2015, there was a 7-year emergency plan by doing a sanitary landfill in Naami. This plan lasted 20 years. It went and above the capacity of the Niamey landfill until the 2015, where we had an emergency waste crisis. And this waste crisis lasted until 2016, where they came up also with an emergency plan by doing landfills, reclaiming land in the sea and doing 2 major landfills in Burj Hamoud and Jdeidi. And we continued from there, looking at emergency plans rather than doing integrated solid waste management plan. Going back to the 2015 crisis, there was a lot of people who went down on the street protesting and demanding an integrated solid waste management plan. And that's why we at the AUB Nature Conservation Center felt like compelled to do something about this crisis. And for the first time, we put a guide to municipal solid waste management, mainly in rural villages. And we also came up with initiatives like the Ptifruz campaign, meaning the sorting campaign, that we tested it in Berytech, and then we extended it into Damour, Ras Beirut, and other places. With this Ptifruz campaign, we were also, along with many other non-governmental organizations and individual initiatives, were able to characterize the waste that is generated from Lebanon. And we showed that the main component of the waste that is generated in Lebanon is organic waste, basically, amounting to 70% in some areas. The amount of recycled materials is probably around 20%, and then we have the refuse from the others. You can imagine the amount of recycled that one can generate in one village, and this is just showing how successful the initiative that we started in Berytech was, and this created several jobs as well in the same village. And then continued to actually invent or adapt a household composting bin that we called the Fox bin, also initiated and designed by Anwar under the supervision of Dr. Majdi Abu Najm. This Fox bin was tested in several households and turned out to be a good initiative as well. I want to stress the point that everything we have produced, from management of initiatives to the guide of municipal solid waste, even the design of this Fox bin, are all put openly access to anybody who wants to take them and actually implement the technology at his or her home. We also initiated, along with the education department at AUB, a solid waste management plan at schools that we called the SAWA program. And SAWA is basically an acronym for Start, Act, Watch, and Award. It's a successful program that has been implemented for around 10 schools now. And we hope to continue after the release of the lockdown amid COVID-19 pandemic. Well, the question is, are these individual initiatives, and I'm saying individual here, also saying institutional initiatives, enough to solve the solid waste problem? Obviously not, because this scene of commingled waste at the curbside of many residential homes is still a common picture, a common scenery that we see in Lebanon every once in a while. And so, after we asked ourselves this question, we said, okay, let's go back to the basics and let's assess what are the components that are needed in order to tackle the problem once and for all in a very systematic way. And we would like to share with you the basic waste-aware indicators that are established in the world. And they basically call for a complete collaboration between the physical components, meaning, you know, the data that you collect from the waste and this, you know, the way we did it first by doing some initiatives. So you need the data, of course, but you need a complete collaboration with the government in order for both entities to make an integrated management plan. And one side cannot work without the other. And this is extremely important. And plus, over and above this, this is the waste-aware indicators, the components of the waste-aware indicators are basically the governance factor, the physical component, making key data, and each of these will have specific sets of indicators that will define what it needs in order for these physical components, governance factor, and key data work properly. And each of these indicators have also factors that are incorporated in them in order for the systematic approach to be complete and sound. And with these also there are other factors that are well designed and well defined. Unless we take this dendromer or this tree all together, the integrated solid waste management will still lack a certain part that will not make it a complete and successful model. So let's take each of these components alone and try to define it. So who are the people who should be incorporated into the model? And here we define the end user, of course. We define the private NGOs and informal sector. Definitely there is the local authority defined by the municipality, the private formal sector, and the policy and legal political entity. And all of these components should be working together, in order to define the stakeholders that are included into the decision or into the decision of making an integrated solid waste management. So those are the who. The what are the main categories responsible for producing data? And we believe that there is an important factor that is, important factors that are the environmental, the financial, the economic, the social, cultural, and the technical, all together need to be well defined in order for us to incorporate all this information into the model. And last but not least, the elements include the generation, starting at home, how much do I generate of waste, the collection, the treatment, the disposal, sorting at the source, and the reduction of course. All of these wastes have been put in many different forms, by the people who are interested in helping reducing and disposing the waste. And here we have so many stakeholders, so many categories, and so many elements to incorporate all together to basically establish a well-defined goal, and from there go into a strategic plan that can last more than 5 years, hopefully lasting 20 years. And this is, in our opinion, that should be taken in consideration in order for us to do what we call an integrated solid waste management plan. And in order for anybody to wrap his head around all of these components, this is where Mr. Anwar Al Shami has come up with a tool that is so useful for individuals and for policymakers to incorporate all of these components together and come up with a decision that is fit to scale and fit to purpose. And from here, I would like to leave it up to Mr. Anwar to take it from here.
Thank you, Dr. Saliba. Allow me one moment to share my screen. So we saw with Dr. Saliba's presentation that the history of solid waste management in Lebanon has been a series of fragile emergency plans ending in crises, leading to new emergency plans. And we also saw that after the 2015 crisis, many interventions from many actors came into play in an attempt to reduce some of these effects. But also we saw that all these will not break the pattern. We now face, unsurprisingly, a new crisis in the collection area of Matan and Kisirwan due to both a cash flow issue and a landfill capacity issue. Basically, the same pattern all over again. So let's try to break this down a bit. Solid waste management, just like other high-level policy decisions to select public infrastructure alternatives, is based on technical considerations and operational considerations. The interplay between the technical and operational aspects factor in many conflicting criteria and many conflicting data, are subject to different types and levels of uncertainty, and necessarily incorporate engineering and expert judgment. So in this case, stakeholders who may have vested interest in specific courses of action, having access to all of these information and uncertainty, basically, are able to justify sometimes opposing courses of action, opposing decisions. And this integration of multiple criteria and certain information makes reaching a well-informed decision on the most suitable alternative necessarily a difficult process. What this usually demands is a systematic framework to represent the technical information. And MODA, or multi-objective decision analysis, is such a systematic approach, and it combines all the technical inputs with the decision maker views or the stakeholder views, and would allow them to rank the performance of each alternative that is available against these criteria. And in this context, we introduced a decision support tool for solid waste treatment and disposal alternatives, and it takes into account the environmental, financial, technical, and economical aspect. And at the time, we placed the tool at the disposal of the Ministry of Environment and other decision makers and stakeholders. So let me break this down more. The decision support tool takes into considers several treatment and disposal decision options. Basically the treatment and disposal options that are already discussed. We have a scenario that is just landfilling everything and extracting energy from landfill gas. Another scenario that is incinerating everything. A scenario that recovers recyclables, and then the remaining organics are anaerobically digested and allows energy extraction from that, and the rejects are incinerated. The scenario of sorting at source with recovery of plastics, also and cardboard and metals, with anaerobic digestion to recover energy, and landfilling rejects instead of incinerating. And a final scenario that's similar, whereby, however, the organics are composted, thereby no energy recovery, and the rejects are landfilled. These are 5 different scenarios. 5 are well discussed. Which one is best? Which one is objectively better for our situation, given our situation? So for each treatment and disposal scenario, each of these 5 scenarios, we took into consideration multiple criteria. And we divided those criteria into 4 categories. The technology, including waste treatment facility development time, the volume of waste remaining after treatment, and the facility area, the energy, including electric energy produced, biogas energy produced, electric energy consumed, diesel energy consumed, the economy, including gate fee, leachate treatment price, electricity sale price, landfill fee, initial investment, and of course, the environmental aspect, including different parameters such as global warming potential, particulate matter formation, human toxicity, and others. So these are 19 different criteria. And we want to say, based on these 19 different criteria and how much we care about each and every one of them and how much each and every one of them is deemed essential, which is the better scenario? Of course, it's difficult. We have 5 scenarios, each of them are ranked differently for each of the 19 sub-factors. So which one is best? Which one is better? How do we quantify that? Let me switch to the tool to make that discussion a bit more tangible. So for each scenario, for each disposal, the treatment and disposal alternative, all of these criteria are computed, but they are computed given governing parameters that represent the Lebanese situation. For example, assume we want to treat 1,500 tons per day, and we assume that the service life for the facility is 30 years. The density of the waste it receives is 0.74 tons per meter cubed. We also take into account other factors such as energy content, fermentability, and electricity sale price, the discount rate, the diesel price. Some of these parameters are displayed here and others can be accessed through the settings. So let's look at all the scenarios, compare them. This is scenario 1, as discussed. It's direct plant filling with energy recovery. And okay, so how much time does it take to develop? 14 months for these criteria that for 1,500 tons per day, for example. And how much volume remains per year? 18 million meter cubed. I'm just going to cycle through a few of the examples just to show how it works. How much electric energy does it produce? 44 gigawatt hours per year. How much does it consume? 8 gigawatt hours per year. On the economic side, similarly, it doesn't cost much in fossil fuel. However, the leachate treatment price is high. On the environment side, it produces 10 million kilograms of volatile organic compounds over its service life. So much kilograms, 14 million kilograms of SO2 equivalent in its service life. How about scenario 2? It's a different profile. It produces much less SO2 equivalent. So if I care a lot about acidification, I shouldn't choose scenario 1. And if I care about freshwater eutrophication, though, I might choose scenario 1. Let's go to scenario 3 with recovery with anaerobic digestion. Let's look at something else. Let's look at energy. It produces a lot of energy, but it also consumes a considerable amount. Scenario 4, and I'm just trying here to illustrate that there are many things to take into consideration. Basically, in this tool that we developed, 19 different criteria to be taken into consideration for each of the scenarios. Now the problem becomes evident. Which one is more suitable? Which one is more suitable for our case? For example, we want something fast, so which one is the fastest? However, we don't want something fast that has high human toxicity. So which one is that? And this is where the multi-criteria decision analysis takes place. So I am the decision maker, or the user is the decision maker, and I know what I want. I do not know how it translates technically to which scenario is best, but I know what I want. For example, I want to minimize the land requirement. I want the scenario that gives me the least land because I don't have land in Lebanon, for example, that is free or not expensive. And I want to minimize land filling. I want something that is developed fast. On the energy side, I'm not that interested in producing lots of biogas, but I want to minimize electric energy consumption, for example, to not to increase the energy deficit that we have. This is just, every user can have different priorities. So Also, I want to minimize initial investment, for example, given our financial crisis. I don't really care about maximizing the electric energy sold. So, and as you slide these priorities, the multi-criteria decision analysis algorithm would quantify them for each of the scenarios. So I really care about human toxicity, for example, and this would change. And how does it look here? Each of these sliders compiles into a running total score for each of the scenarios. For example, given this breakdown of my priorities, it seems like scenario 5, scenario 3, and scenario 4 are equivalent, almost equivalent with scenario 4 being the best. If I change these priorities, the scenarios would change, the priorities would change, and another scenario might emerge as best. This is the basic functioning of it, and this really is a tool to help the decision makers select a scenario, a treatment and disposal alternative that best suits what they think is important. Because this is a fact that we have to acknowledge, that it's not all about the environment or the technical aspect. It's also about the economics. It's also about sociocultural aspect. It's also about the energy production. So multiple decision makers can have multiple priorities, but they do not necessarily know how these translate technically. This tool translates their priorities into the technical aspects of each and every scenario. So we made this effort in an attempt to drive consensus. Consensus not necessarily only within decision makers, but consensus within civil society and decision makers and all stakeholders, whereby if everyone could agree on what they care about in terms of criteria, the tool would take the rhetoric guesswork and iffy expert judgment out of the equation and make everything quantifiable. I cannot say that this tool really changed the course of history of solid waste management in Lebanon. And I really look forward to discuss it more, and especially in the Q&A session, and receive from you some ideas or other ideas on how to break this loop. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saliba, and thank you, Anwar, for this amazing intervention. I believe it's a very useful tool, and hopefully we will benefit from these kind of tools to get to a better situation, at least in Lebanon, regarding the waste management. Before moving to the audience Q&A, the team and I have prepared few questions for our speakers. If I may start with the first one, Dr. Saliba, it's clear from your presentation that NCC has worked a lot in the waste management sector, and and is involved in many related projects. So, how do you think this work correlates with enabling the environment for Lebanese entrepreneurs who are inspired to work in this field?
Thank you for the question, Elias. I think this is a very, very important question. Like I said, we still have a lot of problems in coming up with an integrated solid waste management plan. But I would like to encourage people who have the drive for creating innovative ideas to think about local, fit to scale and fit to purpose, interventions. And I would like to mention few for people who are interested in pursuing, any innovative idea regarding solid waste management. For example, in our rural villages, most of the people have gardens, and we would like to optimize the composting, whether it's the bin itself, the physical size and the shape of the composting facility or composting container, and the composting quality itself. So if anybody is interested in going into composting, there is a lot to learn and a lot to do in order for us to develop a sound and good quality composting that we can produce at the rural villages. Also, I mean, there is a lot to do in order for us to develop containers that will be suitable to be put on balconies, for example, in Beirut as well, for composting our organics, especially that 70% of our waste is organic. Mainly in Beirut, probably in Beirut, it's not 70%, but it is definitely above the 50%. So I would like to encourage a lot of people to think outside the box and come up with ways to develop containers and composting processes that would fit our purpose and our needs. So this is one aspect of where we need more research and more creative ideas. The second is actually recycling or finding better use for the recycling materials, and especially here we're talking about plastics and aluminum cans and others. I would like to mention that people here in our culture use lots of bottles, water bottles, and this is definitely a lot of waste that we're generating per capita. And I would like to ask innovators and youth to think about ways either to repurpose the waste bottles or reduce them from the beginning, from the source, which is extremely important. And in here, I would also invite people to think about to merge the behavioral component with the science and the research in order for them to come up with better solutions to our needs. And the list goes on, of course. So anybody who's interested in this AUB Nature Conservation Center and probably in collaboration with Berytech, we are open to help people in this regard. Can't hear you.
Yes, sorry for that. Yeah. So I was saying it's great to hear this, and we're looking definitely for more collaboration together. Let's move to the second question, because we already have lots of questions from the audience. So to get as much time as possible for that. So basically today we talked mainly about waste management. But I know that NCC is involved in lots of other green projects. For example, Test the Water initiative. So it would be great if you can tell us more about this. How has it started, and what is still needed to take it to the next level?
Well, Test the Water is an initiative that basically merges or incorporates lots of disciplines together. From developing a phone application to involving people in the testing of the water, to developing low-cost monitors, easy to use kits for water testing, as well as understanding the behavioral component to actually drive a change in testing or in attending to clean water and clean hygiene. So we have been working at the AUB Nature Conservation Center with many stakeholders, many professors, including all these disciplines that I talked about, in order for us to promote the easy, to make this water testing accessible to all residents in Lebanon. We understand that we have a water problem, and what we wanted everyone to have access to a water testing kit and also be able to understand the problems associated with, or if there is a problem in his or her own water, on how to solve it and how to change behavior in order to also help in remedying the problem. I would like to say that the innovation in this program comes with the incorporating the behavioral component, developing low-cost monitoring water testing kits that are are accessible and easily used by people. The third component is developing a phone application that is user-friendly and also helpful in uploading data into an interactive heat map, and probably other components that Anwar can add if I missed anything.
Okay, great. That's great. Like back to the waste management, Anwar, and the MODA tool. Can you please tell us more about your personal experience in working with this amazing community and how the ecosystem like supported you in your development?
I would like to first say that the development of MODA was by no means a typical pattern of development. As many similar projects go, it was part of an initiative that the AUB and Nahar started called the Nahar Jamia. And this tool actually came as a response to a challenge that we had faced during a meeting whereby we were asked, okay, so you presented all the scenarios. Which one is better in our case? And we took a lot of time and research to see how we can quantify that. And this tool is the result of our attempt to answer that question. So yeah, that's what I would like to say. It's not a typical pattern, and it emphasizes the need for probably more collaboration between the ecosystem and the research aspect that we have here in Lebanon.
Definitely, I agree with that. One last question to maybe Dr. Najat. I know that like 2 weeks ago, you have delivered a great virtual event at DA. It was virtual because of the current situation. Can you tell us more about your experience with the participating students and how big the impact that they can leave in creating a healthier society and environment through innovation and clean tech?
IBDA for me is an extremely successful story with a committee that I would like to call them the heroes of the COVID-19 pandemic 2020. Let me just briefly tell you what happened. IBDA is a poster forum for undergraduate students to showcase their innovative ideas, and we meet every year at the AUB ground with at least 250 participants or more. And then we have the community coming and engaging into scientific discussions with these undergraduate students. And usually the participants of IBDA from previous year become the coordinators. Some of them, of course, become the coordinator of the IBDA the following year. So this year I had around 14 undergraduate students who were organizing IBDA on the ground of AUB. And then when we had the lockdown, I told them, you know, we're not gonna accept this, and we just have to raise above this lockdown. And I wanted to find an alternative to hold IBDA as in a virtual platform if the lockdown doesn't end by the end of April. That was early on in March. And to my surprise, I mean, I just challenged those undergraduate students, but did not think that they will come up with any solution. And to my surprise, they pulled their efforts together, and they really did pull out an amazing virtual platform, virtual poster or scientific conference where jurors, participants, professors were able to visit the scientific projects and discuss science on this day, on April 22nd, which also falls on Earth Day. So definitely those undergraduate students who were amazing took the challenge and accepted, or did not accept the defeat, and pulled out an excellent event. And thank you for bringing this up. I would like to salute them and salute their efforts, definitely.
And I believe like we can all work together with like much more collaboration, and we can really move lots of these ideas into some maybe new startups in the field which are answering the needs of our society and the global society. Okay, so let's move on to the audience Q&A. We have lots of questions. I'll be sharing my screen now. Okay, so we'll go with the first question. Is it established now that COVID-19 is foodborne? Asking the question after mentioning that food waste might be contaminated. So I believe Dr. Saliba can answer.
What is established is that the virus can live on surfaces. So if somebody has contracted the virus and is eating at home with like plastic plates or plastic forks, or actually disposing of the waste, it can transmit, it can move from his body to the surfaces. And this is what I'm saying when I say that COVID-19 can be in the food. It can, what I said actually, it can be on the surfaces of the food as well as the plastic bag. This is what I meant, and this is important to clarify. And this is coming from people who have contracted the virus, did not show major symptoms and stayed at home. And this is when their waste gets commingled with the waste of other residents who do not have the virus.
Okay. For the second question, like, did Lebanon plan for the pickup of potential of contaminated waste from repatriates who needed to self-isolate for 15 days to prevent open dumping? So
that's important because we already communicated with the government this danger aspect of mixing different waste together, and they promised that they will take care of this situation.
Okay, composting bin capacity and the leachate produced and the compost produced. So I believe they are referring to the Fox bin that you have presented.
Anwar will take this question and the following one.
So these bins are designed to be made from upcycled containers that are these big blue 200-liter barrels. And so that's the capacity, that's the volume capacity of 200 liters. We actually tested these bins in several households. And for a typical family, it would last until it's full around 1.5 months, because lots of volume reduction happens during the composting process. And let me go ahead and tackle the next two questions in terms of bin capacity, leachate production. The bin, actually, even if it's exposed to air, it's a closed system in terms of liquids. And it is designed as such that the convective forces produced by the temperature increase during composting evaporate the leachate. So no leachate is produced from the bin. It is completely contained. And knowing more about the Fox bin, the design and the manual for usage of the bins is available on the AUB NCC website. You can Google that, and everything is posted there. The quality of the compost, I think this is also relevant. So when the houses tested the bins, they had been taking actually also using a phone application that we developed, measurements for temperature and pH and the humidity, and also keeping tally of the types of waste that they're adding, the types of additives such as wood or wood chips or paper or and such, in order to just to collect that data and eventually test the quality of the compost. We also have done a couple of tests in AUB ourselves with uniform waste to see how it goes. We did not conduct a full spectrum of testing on the compost. However, just the carbon to nitrogen ratio, the eventual stability of the compost was very good.
Thank you, Anwar. Another question is regarding the Berytech project. So how much recyclables are produced in Berytech, and are they able to market all? I don't know, Anwar or Dr. Najat. I believe Dr. Najat maybe can call it.
Anwar will handle that too, because he was leading this initiative in Berytech.
Okay. Please, Anwar.
At the time the project, like the collection started after the campaign that we had, we were collecting within a week of starting around 1 ton of recyclables per day. It's a big village, it's 50,000 residents. And we were storing them in this big hangar that you see in the photo. Eventually, we needed to also acquire a compactor to save on space. And yes, they had found a local company who would buy, several local companies, each one was buying a separate kind of waste. And to an extent, they were able to fund the wages of the people working on this collection scheme by selling these recyclables.
Great. Another question. So I belong to a village. How can I include it to Beirut Tifruz initiative?
Okay, let me if you are in a village or in Beirut, it makes a big difference, because Mrs. Mona Halla is leading the initiative of Beirut Tifruz or Ras Beirut Tifruz. So in Beirut, it's a different dynamics because we have the buildings. But in the villages, we are now working with 2 villages to create what we call a prototype of how to manage waste in rural communities. This is under the Environment Academy program, and we will be sharing all the steps with the community, openly accessed, hopefully by the end of this summer. So please stay tuned to our program, the environment program. And if you want, you can take part of the environmental program next year, and this way we can help in actually coming up with a plan that fits very well the scale of the village you're talking about.
Question for Anwar. So many Lebanese mentioned the Sweden model. Is this a good model for Lebanon? What are the environmental worries? Is there a better option?
I'm guessing by the Sweden model, this question refers to mass incineration of rejects and recycling of like recovery of other parts. I mean, this is the main point of the whole discussion. It's not my personal opinion, and it's not any other expert's personal opinion. It really requires lots of research, lots of work, and lots of planning to come up with a better option, or saying if this is a good option or not. This is the whole point. It's not an easy undertaking to come up with a sustainable, as Dr. Saliba, 20-year plan, as Dr. Saliba said. It really needs research, and it really needs like think tanks to think about it and quantify that. We don't even have a baseline for what our waste is and what is our waste production. We don't even have a population census to see how much waste is produced. So given all of these data gaps and these conflicting information of, for example, some people say we have 50% organics and other surveys say 70%. Given all of these conflicting information, we really cannot say which is a better model. The whole point of the effort that we were trying to make is to say that there is a need for research, and there is a need for careful planning to say which is a better option.
And there's another question about the tool, the MODA. So is it public? You told us earlier that it's on the AUB NCC.
I will paste the link here in the chat for everyone.
Please.
In a second.
Okay. Another question for Anwar is your tool being used by the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Energy and Water, or for the coming 3-year plan? for the goal. Are there consideration publicly available? Are these considerations publicly available?
Well, by the time we were developing, publishing, and publicizing the tool, the solid waste management plan or strategy roadmap was being underway and being developed. And soon after we had made the tool public to everyone, not in like private meetings with the Minister of Environment, the solid waste management strategy was published. So I cannot say to what extent they have used the tool, but we have held meetings with them, with the Ministry of Environment, with the Parliament Committee for Environment, and with other stakeholders, and made that available to them. And this is that's all I could say. I really cannot say to what extent it was featured.
I believe a similar question is like, are you training municipalities to use this tool? Is it available for all to use it? So maybe you can answer the municipality part. So have you shared this with municipalities?
We have another tool that is more suited to municipalities, because as you have seen, like this tool considers scenarios that are large scale, probably more oriented towards a central solution or less decentralized solution, because all of these scenarios, as you have seen, landfilling at large scale, or building an incinerator, or building an anaerobic digester, they really don't apply to a small municipality. So this is more on a level of muhafaza, or a level of at least some kind of centralized contract. So no, this tool wasn't aimed at the municipality. It was more aimed towards high-level decision-making at the level of Ministry of Environment and such. The other tool that we have for the municipalities, yes, we have tested with many municipalities, and we're still like fine-tuning it now.
Okay, good to know. So these calculations are based on what composition of waste? The composition of waste by itself is a problem to define. So all research available is not accurate. I believe this correlates with what you have said earlier.
Yes, exactly.
So lots of research is needed. Yeah.
I just want to say I pasted the link in the chat. It is a problem indeed, and that's why whenever you guys navigate the tool, you can check the composition and in the different settings. So we made this to be fully modular. If new research comes and says that this is the definite composition of this area that you're looking to build a 1,500 tons per day facility in, then you can input those and they would affect the result. If new research comes in and says that no, your numbers, the NCC numbers are incorrect in terms of whatever percent energy recovered, the users can change that based on more recent research. We had inputted the best available information and based on expert solicitations and new publications at the time, but we have made all of that editable. So when new information comes in, this tool will still be useful. But yeah, I see the point in the question. Not all the numbers are accurate.
And I believe like the next question is, I believe falls under the same idea. So we lack in Lebanon statistics and not have accurate numbers on statistics that describe the actual situation. So this, I believe, this is answered. So what standards were used as a basis for the tool computation?
I suggest that Jules would check the settings in the tool whenever they have time, and this would be the input data for the tool, the input parameters. The remaining algorithm that works it out, it's well available and published online. It's called multi-criteria decision analysis, and they're welcome to read up on it. It's well established.
Okay. Another question from Ruth as well, like, are there any limitation to the three main parameters entered initially as input for the tool to be used?
Currently, the three main parameters that are entered, they're not bound. They do not have upper bounds, but obviously for the tool to upper or lower bounds. But obviously for the tool to produce reasonable results, the numbers should be as accurate as possible. For example, if I say that my service life is 5 years, it's a completely different like sizing of the facility and production of, for example, SO2 than if the service life is 30 years. So there are no limitations. It's basically made as a design tool for people to use to iterate different options they have. Like if I don't have money for a facility that would last 30 years, how much money would I save if I just make it last for 20 years? And these computations are done automatically.
Okay. The next question, I believe we answered it. Also, the tool is available. You already shared with us the link. Regarding the scale from 1 to 10 that you showed us for the relevant parameters, so is there some sort of guideline on how to quantify the user's interest in a certain parameter?
Yeah, so that's the that's the core of the problem, of not the problem, but that's the core of how decisions are made. I am, for example, a Minister of Environment, and I happen to care a lot about human toxicity. So I just ramp up the human toxicity reduction to 10. And I'm another Minister of Environment, and I don't care at all about human toxicity. I just care of having a solid waste collection and disposal happening, and I just tone it down. It really depends on the user. So this is trying to capture that there is both subjective and an objective aspect of decision making. Different decision makers would prefer different options because they are inherently have different preferences. So no, I don't know if this question asks if when people use it, does the tool record their preferences? It doesn't now, but this could be a useful addition if it was used in like consensus building situations, I guess.
Okay. So how would this tool differentiates between municipal and hazardous waste?
It doesn't. It assumes that all waste is municipal waste. And I guess this is a big problem because even the current waste stream that we have now usually doesn't, in many cases, doesn't differentiate between municipal and hazardous waste. And there are big efforts being made on decommingling the waste into municipal commingled waste and just hazardous special wastes. We couldn't really quantify that in the tool. We just made the assumption that all waste that is to be solved basically by the tool is just municipal waste.
Another question is like the best technical solution is robotics and sorting. Why we don't coordinate with the order of engineers, mechatronics, for example, to make automated sorting machines? So why, Dr. Saliba, are you aware of any coordination that's happening with the order of engineers?
I can answer this question. I mean, yes, we can develop probably robotics to sort the waste. But the problem is not there because now the sorting facilities that have been introduced, some of them are working very well. I mean, they could be enhanced by adding some robots there. The problem is, how do we start? Where do we start? And the moment we transfer the waste with those pressing containers, this is where you're mixing food with recycling materials, and then it becomes much more difficult to separate. So there is a problem at the collection stage and at the stage where it leaves the house. And those two steps are extremely important to ensure a good separation and a good sorting of the waste. So the way it exits the house and the way from the house to the sorting facility are transported. And in those two steps, that the waste has to remain separated so a good sorting happens at the end. And this is extremely important. So in this whole picture, the individual really still plays a major role in reducing and sorting.
While the integrated solid waste management mostly lies on the shoulders of individual municipalities, what do you think the role of the Union of Municipalities should be in the sector?
In the guide for municipal waste that we produced in 2016, we put several scenarios. The scenarios of where each municipality wants to take this on their shoulder, or the union of municipality. And for the economy of scale, yani for feasibility and better economizing on the prices, actually it is always recommended that the union of municipalities work together to define one integrated solid waste management plan. The best, for economy of scale alone, the best way to do it is to do it a centralized approach taken on by the government. But in case the decentralized approach is going to be implemented, it is always best to have a collection of several municipalities working together to come up with a plan.
Thank you, Dr. Saliba. Another question is, I believe if the potable water reaches the houses with filters, this will reduce the plastics in house and also the volume. It's more like
well, that's another big question. I mean, I don't think we can answer it right away. Yes, filters can reduce the amount of contaminants, but then there is a cost on the filter change. There is the capacity of the filters and how soon they can reach this capacity and how often they need to be changed. So there is a whole procedure, I would say, and a process that goes on with having filters inside the houses, and it's not easily put as an alternative solution to the water problem.
What are the prospects of using recyclables to create new materials, closing life cycles?
Of course, there is a lot of rooms here to invent, innovate, and come up with the solutions. The whole world is putting and betting on a lot of money to actually use all the resources that are generated from waste, and they no longer call it waste; they will call it even resources, to come up with better solutions of how to reuse them. We invite everyone to come up with solutions, and we'll work with the best we can with them in order to promote such practices.
And how do you evaluate the new integrated solid waste management law?
At least it's a law. We evaluated this law and we published it in Nahar, I think last year. There are a lot of good initiatives in law, and there are some concerns that we raised.
And how can we acquire a FOX composting room?
You can look at the manual openly accessed at the AUB Nature Conservation website. There is step-by-step procedure and explanation of how to build it yourself. And it is it's purposely put there so that people can build it on their own. So it's a DIY, it's a do-it-yourself thing. We don't sell them, we don't make them, but we provide the know-how. And in case you have questions, Anwar will be, and I'm sorry, Anwar, I'm speaking on your behalf, will be happy to answer your questions.
Okay. And one last question, I believe it's regarding the COVID-19 situation. Like, would it be enough if the municipalities spray the waste in the open dumps with disinfectants to reduce the contamination process?
And what do we do? Yeah, I mean, this is definitely an emergency response situation or mitigation. I totally agree. Maybe that's the first thing we need to do. But why do we have to have open dumps? I don't understand. I mean, why do we have to accept the open dumps and then start mitigating open dumps? Open dumps should not be there. We should be able to assume, every one of us, and every governmental entity assume its own responsibility, and we definitely have enough brain and will to make a good integrated solid waste management plan.
Definitely. I believe that's it for the questions for today. So I'd like to thank you once again, Dr. Saliba and Anwar, for joining us today. It was really a very interesting discussion, and we tackled lots of interesting ideas. Thank you to all our listeners as well, and we hope you enjoyed the session today. Before closing, please keep in mind that the deadline to apply for the first batch of the Clean Energy Accelerator is beginning of June. So if you think you have an innovative solution in the clean tech sector, I urge you to check the website and submit your application. Also, when signing out, it will be great if you can answer a small survey so that we keep on improving. Stay tuned for the content of next Tuesday webinar, and hope to see you then.
Thank you, Alliance. Thank you, Berytech. Thank you, Clean Energy.